What does a disaster have to do with the stars?
What separates cosmos from chaos?
How exactly did Earth get its name?
To etymology and beyond, it's time for another Words Unravelled.
All systems are go as we set out beyond the stratosphere to explore words from beyond this world on Words Unravelled.
Yes, we are slipping the surly bonds of Earth and touching the face of etymology in space. How do you like that?
I love it. That's perfect. So, to get us started, I think we should start at home with the name of Earth, shall we?
I think that's a very good idea. The third rock from the sun. Where does it get its name in English then, Jess?
It's from the Old English eartha, meaning dirt, soil, or country. So it was just as much about the land, if not more, than it was about the planet. It was also a word for the material human world, but more commonly, that was known as Midgard or Midgard, as we sometimes hear it today, as recorded in works like Beowulf or in more recent media like the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, that's right. And the interesting thing about our name for Earth is that we didn't, we didn't look up to come up with a name for our planet. We looked down.
Hmm.
We looked at the ground, and it means Earth, as in like soil and stuff. But we're not the only ones to have done that. In almost most of the languages of the world, the word for the world comes from actually the word for the ground, for the soil itself. In French, in Mandarin, in Japanese, in Hindi, all these words ultimately come from a word for the ground beneath our feet.
The Latin terra, too, which is sometimes considered another name for Earth if you want to align Earth with the other planets, which are all Latin in origin.
I feel a little bit sorry for Earth because it's the only one that isn't named after a god.
Well, in a sense, it kind of is because it is thought that like the Roman Terra and the Greek Gaia were personified as a goddess type character, and it's possible that that was true for the name of Earth as well.
Ah, very good, very good.
Also, one thing that I love about the word Earth is its connection to the word Earthling, which you might consider that to be sort of a sci-fi word these days, affiliated with like Earthlings versus Martians versus Venusians. But Earthling is an Old English word too. It's been around since about the 6th century. And you'll notice like we don't use this ling ending on the Latin derived planets. We don't use, say, Marsling or Venusling. Instead, we use the Latin derived ending IAN. But the ling ending is a mashup of two Old English endings, the LE ending and then the ING ending. So the LE ending makes a word into a tool or something you use for a purpose, like a thimble is a thumb tool, a handle is a thing your hand can use. And then the ing ending could be used to create different verb tenses and participles. But when it's attached to the LE suffix, it becomes a diminutive or something small that you use for a purpose, which I think is really neat. So an earthling was a word for a plowman, someone who works the earth,
Oh, okay. So
particularly like a person of working class status.
they have a lot of this in German. A lot of words end with ling, and that they're a person associated with something. So a Fluchtling is a refugee. It's someone who is fleeing, for example. And then obviously you've got a Schmetterling, which is a butterfly, which is an adorable word. It's a very Germanic suffix, which, like you say, explains why when we're talking about planets that are named after Greek and Roman gods, we're not sticking ling at the end of them.
Right. We have those words in English too. Like a hireling is someone who works for hire. A shaveling was a mocking term for a friar with a shaved head. And then in Old English, there was also a from beardling, a young man of his first beard.
Nice. I'm hoping to become one of those at some point. I don't have to shave very often.
You're highly evolved. How's that?
That's what I keep telling
Mhm.
people. That's what I keep telling people, but they don't seem to be willing to accept it. So Earthling though has become, this word we associate with an alien perspective on our planet and on us, right? So it is time for us to look beyond our planet, right, and talk about some of the things that we see in the cosmos.
Ooh,
There's another
yes.
good word. And maybe that's a good word to go to next.
All right, let's hear about it.
Gladly. Well, I mean, the cosmos is the order of things, quite literally, and it's a Greek term that is in direct opposition to the concept of chaos. That's what I know about cosmos.
Order versus chaos. That's right. So the Greek cosmos was also a word for an arrangement of decorations, especially on fabric, which I think is kind of interesting. There are a few words that we affiliate with space that are from like the fabric and textile arts. Like a rocket was originally a bobbin, and a shuttle was originally a oh gosh, I forget what kind of tool it's used for.
Well, a shuttle is a thing that zips back and
That's
forth
right.
in a loom, isn't it? Yeah, that's where like a shuttle bus goes back and forth.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah, a shuttle
Excellent.
service.
But yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of these came from fabric terms, and so the cosmos, as this word for like a decorated fabric, implies that like the night sky is decorated with stars, much like the decorations on a woman's dress or a beautiful, costly fabric.
that's lovely, isn't it? And I like the way that these things relate what is up there and what we don't really know that much about to things very mundane
Oh
down
yeah,
here, like like fabric or milk. Milk comes up in a couple of terms, doesn't it? Because we have the Milky Way, obviously, but you might call it the Milky Way galaxy. But if you do that, you're being somewhat repetitious
that's a
because
pleonasm.
a pleonasm is that what you call that?
You could call it a tautology, a linguistic
Yeah.
tautology, or a pleonasm. Typically, a tautology is sometimes considered to be an error, whereas a pleonasm is more openly accepted.
Oh, right. So could a pleonasm be more sort of emphatic? Is that why you're
Yeah,
using
you
it?
might say that, or simply like we've forgotten that the word galaxy literally means milky. So saying the Milky Way galaxy doesn't feel repetitious, even though it is.
Yeah, it's from the Greek galaxias kyklos, meaning milky circle.
And that means that it's related to like lactose, for example.
Exactly.
Another one that I think is really beautiful is that the word planet literally means wanderer. It's from the Greek phrase asteris planetae, meaning wandering star.
Yeah, planetes is another term that I've heard that it comes from, right? And it's called that. Do you know why they're called wandering stars?
I'm assuming because they were observed moving through the night sky in different patterns than the stars were, quote unquote, moving.
Yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
Because of the perspective that we have on planets as we overtake them as we go around the sun, at some points they can appear to change direction. Because I'm doing like finger gestures here to try and explain this to those watching, but to those listening, it's a little tricky. But I don't think I'm doing a particularly good job of it anyway, so don't worry. But basically, these are the stars that appear to occasionally change direction. It was as if they were wandering, so they were called planetes. They were called planets.
How do you pronounce Uranus, by the way?
I actually had to look that up before we came here. I mean, I did
I was
spend.
asking how you specifically pronounce it because that's how I say it, but I also know it makes it the butt of literally the butt of
Yeah,
many jokes.
bravo, bravo. I actually did grow up calling it Uranus without even sniggering at
Okay,
it.
all right.
But I think I've started saying Uranus. And actually, I believe Uranus is, of the two, the more sort of accepted in scientific circles.
I could
That
see
sort of
that. So I went
emphasis of
to
the A.
space
And,
camp.
and I don't think it's because of prudishness.
Right.
Sorry. I just talked over you saying that you went to space camp.
I did. I did. I went to space camp as a kid, and even then, they were calling it Uranus, at least in the context of space camp. But I've
Sorry, this
also
is such an American thing. What on earth is going to space camp?
space camp is
What does
the
that involve?
best. Oh my god, it's so much fun. So in Huntsville, Alabama, NASA has like a training facility, but it's also like it's a camp where you can go as a kid, and I think they even have adult programs now and experience things like what it's like to train for gravitational pull, and you eat like freeze dried food and you learn about science and space and astronomy. Honestly, if I were better at math, I would probably have pursued astronomy.
Instead, here you are just talking about the words, nice,
Exactly.
nice and safe, not being flung around at what I don't know what speeds they make you go at, where they make your face go all sort of melty.
I mean, if someone offered me the chance to get on a spacecraft, I absolutely would, but I'm probably not smart enough for that, at least scientifically speaking.
We all find our geeky little corners, don't we?
Right.
Uh, So, oh yeah, what were we talking about? We were talking
Right,
about
sorry. We were talking about the fact that like the reason I brought up Uranus or Uranus
yeah.
is that it was observed to be a star until, or it was thought to be a star until like the late 1600s or 1700s. At the time it was called, before that, Georgium Cetus, or George's star, after King George III. But it was identified as a planet, there we go, in the late 1700s by Sir William Herschel, and then it was called the Georgian planet until it was named to align with the other planets that were named after Roman gods. Oh, also, Uranus is the only planet that uses a Greek name of a god, which is also very interesting. Uranus is a primordial deity who's the son and husband of Gaia and the father of the Titans.
Do we know why that Uranus is the only
Um,
exception?
that is a great question. I don't know that. I bet the folks in the comments will tell us. I think it may have been due to the fact that it was named later than some of the others.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
The gas giants Neptune was also thought to be a star for a long time. Neptune, of course, corresponds to Poseidon, between Greek and Roman mythology, and the name is probably cognate with nebula, which means cloudy, right?
Yeah.
It was identified in the 1800s because its gravitational pull had been observed on Uranus, but it was too dim to be seen by the naked eye. Granted, Galileo had seen it, but it had been observed as a star, presumably a wandering star.
I just want to move on from your Uranus because every time I'm hearing the word, I'm less mature than I was as a child on this particular issue. But there are other things moving around in the night sky that we can spot, and it can be quite difficult to differentiate between the terms. Right, I'm talking about meteors, asteroids, comets, meteorites. Can you help us with those?
Ah, I love these. I love these. They're some of my favorites. Meteor, I think, is one of the most interesting one because it also appears in the word meteorology, and that's because it literally means a thing high up in the air. So like meteorology is the study of any atmospheric phenomenon, and meteorology used to not just be weather, but it was anything that happened in the atmosphere. So there were four kinds of meteors. There were aerial meteors, which were notable winds and tornadoes; aqueous meteors, which included water based atmospheric phenomena like rain, snow, hail, dew; and then luminous meteors that were like auroras and rainbows and light based phenomena; and then igneous meteors, which included fiery looking phenomena like shooting stars.
Oh wow! So what we're talking about are the igneous meteors, right?
Basically, yeah, it's narrowed to that term, except for in the term meteorology.
Yeah, and I think a meteor becomes a meteorite once it hits the ground.
And then a comet is one with a tail. It
Yeah,
means long haired in reference to that tail, which I think is cool. The like hair streaming out behind it.
yeah, that's right, and that's because they're made of dust and
Mhm.
ice, which meteoroids, meteorites, meteors, asteroids as well. Uh, they're not made of ice and dust in the same way as comets are. An asteroid is just a rocky object that's orbiting the sun, whereas a meteoroid could just be flying around willy nilly through space, I suppose.
Can you tell us the literal meaning of asteroid? Because I think this has some cool connections.
You should take us right there because it means, am I right in thinking, star like?
Star like or star shaped, which I think is super cool.
Right. Like cuboid is cube shaped. Okay.
And same
Gotcha.
thing as like humanoid is a non human species that is human shaped, or it could be a human species. It depends on how on your sci-fi author.
And another Jess Safaris fact that I learned, a factoid is fact shaped, but is not a fact.
That's right. A factlet is an actual factoid in terms of the way in terms of the etymology at least. So the part that I wanted to get into is like the many words that include that aster element, meaning star. It's related to the word star too. It has some other relatives too, right? So it has like the word disaster. You know this one?
No, I had no idea. That's got something to do with
Yes,
stars.
it literally means ill-starred. A disaster is something like a terrible happenstance that presumably the stars have foretold or was caused by a bad alignment of the stars. I love that one.
Wow, if I take nothing away from this episode but that, it has been a good use of my time.
It's one of my favorite etymology facts out there. And then of course there's astronaut, which is a star sailor. I love that one. I think that's adorable. My sister did this fantastic illustration of a an astronaut attached to a ship one time that I think I'm going to try to use to accompany my next book.
Ooh, is it about space?
It isn't. It's about interesting word origins, but it has a whole chapter on space.
Is this you testing your material
Well, I
out for
already
us?
wrote it, so just we'll consider this one a preview.
Okay, nice. Bonus. And astronaut and cosmonaut came up in our episode about nautical terms. And while researching this, another term that came up in that same episode popped up again, because we were talking about the origin of poop deck. By the way, I have to apologize to everyone once again for suggesting that the poop deck was at the front of a ship when in fact it is not. But we learned during the course of that episode that the poop bit comes from the Latin puppis, and puppis is a constellation, and it's named for the stern of the Argo, the boat that we talked about, that Jason and his pals were seeking the Golden Fleece in.
So what you're saying is that the poop deck is from space, but it's not from Uranus.
It's space poop, but it's not from Uranus. Indeed. But we should talk about constellations then, because the
Yes.
stella in there is obviously related to the word star as well.
Mhm.
Although in this case, constellation means shining together.
What are some of the constellations that you've learned about?
Well, do you know what I thought was interesting? A lot of the constellations that we see from the northern hemisphere are again from Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and that's because the Greeks and the Romans knew about them, right? But a lot of the constellations that are visible in the southern hemisphere obviously get named a lot later. Well, they get the names that we use for them a lot later, but in the southern hemisphere, rather than Greek and Roman names, you get Neo-Roman names for them. So like Musca is the fly, which is a constellation that's visible from the southern hemisphere. And then you've got really scientific ones like microscopium and telescopium. But as for the ones that we know and love in the northern hemisphere, Andromeda, for example, which is named by the Greeks after the daughter of Queen Cassiopeia and King Cepheus. She was married to Perseus because he had previously rescued her from a sea monster, which I think makes him more than worthy. So she'd been sacrificed to the monster because Poseidon was annoyed.
That happens.
Because Cassiopeia, her mum, had said that Andromeda was, sexier than the nymphs.
Oh no.
That really wound Poseidon up. So they had to do a little sacrifice, but rescued by Perseus. So, all good by the end of it. And then you've got little stories that are playing out across the sky as well. People will know Orion, the hunter, but you also got Canis Major and Canis Minor, which are the two dogs. The Canis bit is from the same root as Canary Islands, for example, which is the dog islands, not the Canary Islands, but also Canine. And they're hunting with Orion, who's firing his arrow at Lepus, which is the hare constellation.
Oh, neat. Those are very visible in the sky above my house in the fall.
Oh, here's one. What do you commonly call Ursa Major, the Great Bear?
That would be the Big Dipper, or for Ursa Minor, the Little Dipper, right?
I mean, and I think it's most common in England to call it the plough.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. An interesting thing about those two, did you know that Arctic and Antarctic are both words that are referencing that constellation? So Arctic is from the Greek Arctos, meaning bear, because the constellation Ursa Major is always visible in the northern polar sky. And Antarctic, therefore, literally means opposite the bear, which also is beautifully serendipitous because there are bears in the northern hemisphere, but not the southern.
Exactly. That is how you remember where polar bears live.
Right.
And you discover that they are not hanging around with penguins who are only at the southern pole.
The penguins are probably pretty happy about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, thrilled. I'm too close to polar bears for comfort.
Goodness.
Gladly. Send me to the Falkland Islands, no problem.
So related to constellations, we have the zodiac, right? The segment of the sky containing the zodiac constellations, which is from the Greek phrase zodiakos kyklos, same as in that Galaxius kyklos phrase, meaning circle of little animals, which is kind of adorable.
Oh, that is cute.
Not all of them are animals, though, right?
No, they're not. Some of them are people. Some of them are twins.
Libra is a set of scales.
Yeah, well, what's What's that about? Cancer is an interesting one because obviously cancer is a disease, but it's
Mhm.
cancer. The crab is the constellation. But those two terms. I mean, they're basically the same. Like cancer means crab, right? And they come from the same source. In fact, in German, the word for the constellation and indeed the sign of the zodiac and the disease are both the same.
Huh.
And the disease is named after crabs because the sort of swollen arteries around the cancerous cells were said to resemble a crab in
Little
some
crab
sort of way.
legs, right? And the way they hold on to.
Cancer ultimately comes from the Greek karkinos, which is also where we get the word carcinoma or carcinogen as well. These are all sort of related terms.
Not to make light of cancer, which, cancer, but
Yeah, screw it.
um uh one time I was making a video specifically about this word for TikTok, and I let the auto captions do their thing, and when I said carcinos, it translated that as quirky nose.
I got a quirky nose.
I have been accused of that before, so maybe it was appropriate.
Wait, actually, we don't have to include this, but I noticed you've been getting some correspondence about your
Yes,
nose.
we can include this if you want, but yeah, I do have a fan who is particularly intrigued by my quirky nose, so to speak.
Well, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, maybe you should get yourself over to YouTube. Check out Jess's nose and see if it's much to shout about. Little tap on the nose from Jess there.
Right.
Again, not laughing at cancer, but the fact that in German to have crabs is actually to have cancer rather than to have another condition
Interesting,
could
yeah.
also be a source of confusion.
Though I definitely I think that the term crabs definitely gets to the heart of what that particular STD condition looks like.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah, it's true. I mean,
it's genital lice. Like
why does there have to be a blushing moment every episode?
I'm sorry, we can cut
We
that
didn't
part.
have to say genital lice. I already talked about it in a gentle way.
All right, we can avoid that. We can cut that.
No, it's happened now. Everyone can see it. Yeah. But what more can you tell us about the zodiac?
Let's see. In Old English, it was called probably going to mispronounce this, but I think it was 12 takna, meaning the 12 signs. And in Middle English, it was sometimes called the bestiary or Our Lady's Way, referring to the path of the moon.
How many signs of the zodiac are there? Are there 12 or are there 13?
So there are 88 officially recognized constellations established by the International Astronomical Union in 1922. And of course, people have been watching the stars for centuries. So, they're as old as Mesopotamia. The Greeks, Ptolemy in particular, I believe, had 48 official constellations. So there are many, but the 12, I believe, had to do with what you referenced before, like the most visible ones in that particular part of the sky.
I don't know why I'd got this vague idea that there were 13. Why might I have thought that? Oh, because there are 13 cycles of 28 in a year, aren't there?
There's going to be someone who knows a lot about astrology in the comments who is going to be like pulling their hair out about this, because I'm sure they know they're like, there is a 13th one. I have a lot of thoughts about this and opinions because plenty of people spend a lot of their time invested in the movement of the stars, which I think is very cool. But I'm more on the science end of my interest on that. By the way, do you know the difference between astronomy and astrology and how each one got its name?
No, actually. No, I don't know.
Basically, they have been confused for centuries and they've changed places many times. Astronomy showed up in English first in the 12th century, but it was a word for both the spiritual and scientific study of celestial bodies. Astrology showed up in the 14th century, but it was divided into natural astrology, which was like foretelling tides and seasons and eclipses, and then judicial astrology, which was foretelling how the stars impacted human affairs. And then astronomy became the science-focused one in the 17th century as an echo of the classics, pulling in the classics again, as we did in the 17th century quite a bit, because in Latin, astronomia was more scientific than astrologia.
I see. I think the confusion somewhat mirrors that of naturism and naturalism.
Right.
And getting it wrong can lead to all kinds of problems, really.
Absolutely.
I mean, it can lead people to judge you a very different way to the way you intend to be judged.
We actually lost the coolest one of these words, though. I guess we didn't lose it. I'm sure someone uses it, but what we call astrology now may have also more commonly been called astromancy for a while, or divination by means of the
Ooh,
stars, which sounds so wizardly. I love it.
astromancy. Yeah,
Hmm.
I like that. Bring that one back.
That's proper witchcraft right there. I would like to, since we touched on it just briefly, I'd like to talk about words that come from space, but maybe we don't affiliate with space currently. A lot of these tend to be related to the moon, like lunatic and lunacy and loony and moonstruck, which all describe mental conditions that were attributed to changes in the moon and tides. That one also sometimes was affiliated with femininity, unfortunately, because lunacy, of course, was associated with other monthly things that happen for women that might cause you to be, frustrated more than usual.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Mhm.
etymological links between terms for moon and month. I mean, etymologically
Mhm.
speaking, the words month and moon are basically the same. They have exactly the same history. I guess is menstruation linked as well?
Menses means basically monthlies. That's about the extent of it. Yeah, that
Yeah.
overlap is pretty clear. The Proto-Indo-European root there means to measure. Interestingly, so it's also related to words like meter and geometry and things along those lines.
Oh,
Metric,
yeah, there we go. Oh, yeah, that's amazing.
perimeter, semester, symmetry, thermometer.
I'd never drawn that link
Mhm.
before. Have you got some more of these, Jess? Words that we're using quite often that are actually space linked?
Eccentric is one of my favorites. Now it
Mm.
describes someone who behaves in an odd or whimsical way, but it was originally an astronomical term. The astronomers believe that planets and stars orbited or rotated around the Earth for a time. And according to that model, it was thought that some planets were orbiting with Earth precisely at the center of their path, but planets that didn't orbit with Earth at the center were said to be eccentric, meaning out of the center.
That makes sense. It's interesting how we describe quirks of human behavior by relating them to space, isn't it? I mean, we still do. We say someone's a bit spaced out. It's funny that, isn't it?
Right. And then there are measurement terms like apogee, the point where the moon is farthest from the sun, now a word for a climax or a point of any kind. There's also perpendicular, which was normally used in navigation and astronomy or navigation by the stars. It referred to the line perpendicular to the horizon. Exaltation is also originally a space word. It was the position of a planet in the zodiac where it exerts the greatest influence.
Oh, right, we came across that word before as well, didn't we? Exaltation of
Uh
larks.
huh.
Yeah, there we
That's right.
go.
Reception was originally used in astrology too, which is really interesting. It was the well, I guess not originally because you could receive anything, and so perhaps it was nouned in that way, but it commonly appeared in astronomy in the 14th century or astrology because it implied the effect of two planets on one another. And that could be of both like the physical sense and the astrological sense.
That's interesting. Yeah, reception. Receipt is one of those words in English where a silent letter has been added by well meaning classicists desperate to show off its origin in Latin. Recipere, right?
Other words that were, even if they weren't necessarily strictly from the astronomical world, but were popularized through that language include like coincidence or coincide, which means like to be identical in substance or nature, and that was used in space or things that fell together implied like coincidences were caused by the stars. Same with culmination, where a heavenly body is on the meridian, which is neat.
Wow, Jess, I didn't know any of these. These are all fantastic.
I mean, it makes sense that stars would be so important to our language because not only do they influence things like not stars necessarily, but heavenly bodies and gravitational pull influence the weather. They influence tides. They influence how we travel across the ocean and across the earth, how we navigate. So you can see why this would be so embedded into the way we speak.
And we sort of touched on it already, but let's just get into the names of the planets because I think people will feel like we've sold them short if we don't actually explain those. Where exactly do they come from, and why are the certain planets named for what they're named for?
So we touched on the fact that many of them are named after, most of them are named after Roman gods. I like the overlap and stories you get in some of the earliest planets to be identified outside of Earth. Like Mercury is named for its apparent speed, like that of the god Mercury, which corresponds to Hermes. That's also reflected in the name of the metal Mercury, which is described by its movement and is called Quicksilver.
Yeah.
And quick here means like lively or alive, describing like silver that appears to move very quickly and isn't as dense or viscous as molten silver.
Yeah, it's the same as quicklime as well, which
Mhm.
is effectively, or quicksand. Quicksand even better. Although quicksand is a liquid, but you can also think of quicksilver as mercury as liquid silver.
Exactly. Also, this sense appears in the phrase like the quick and the dead in theological contexts, which means like the living and the dead.
All right. Yeah.
hmm
Okay.
Venus is lovely, obviously, named after the goddess of beauty and love, similar to Aphrodite. We talked about how it's related, or we roughly touched on the fact that it's related to the term venery in our collective episode. In Old English, it was called Morgenstera, meaning morning star, which many affiliate now with Lucifer, because in Old English, Lucifer was another name for Venus as it appears in the morning sky. Lucifer's also been recorded as an epithet for the goddess Diana because it literally means light bringing, also Artemis. The name was used as a proper name of Satan thanks to the line in Isaiah, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" But in the Greek translation of the text, that name is Phosphoros, which also means light bearer or light bringer. And Phosphoros was also a Greek god affiliated with Venus as it appears in the morning, compared to his brother Hesperus, the evening star.
And Venus is always the easiest of the planets to spot.
And at any time of day. It's interesting how all of that lore is so entangled, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Mars, that one's pretty obvious, affiliated with Aries and the god Mars, named for its red color, which is visible even from Earth. The Greeks called it Pyrois, I believe, the fiery.
Mars being the god of war, of course,
Exactly,
we should
that's right.
mention.
Um,
Fiery red war.
I'm reading a really good book called Red Rising right now. It's kind of like it's a YA novel, which isn't usually my typical genre, but the way it's written is very strong. So it's like a dystopian story set on Mars. Highly recommend. And then of course we've got Jupiter, the largest planet named after Zeus for its size, of course. Jupiter in Latin means godfather as well, which
Oh,
I think is
really?
neat.
It has an actual meaning. I didn't
hmm
realize that. You just tend to think of these. I mean, as you've already shown with the other ones, but you just tend to think of these as proper nouns. You know, just
Right.
as names. They just exist, but they have to come from somewhere, don't they? Like all names really do, ultimately.
hmm
Next, Saturn.
It corresponds with Cronus or Kronos in Greek, a Titan and a son of Uranus and Gaia. Both and especially Saturn were affiliated with agriculture and
Mm,
bounty, and this was celebrated during December with Saturnalia, which ultimately dovetailed nicely with celebrations around Yuletide and would contribute to the celebration of Christmas in December.
fantastic.
Oh, we already talked about Uranus and Neptune, so rewind if you want to be reminded of those. But I will also die on the hill that Pluto is a planet. It's in all the mnemonics. It may be tiny, but it is mighty.
Dwarf planet still has the word planet in it. By the way, what's your mnemonic of choice?
Actually, I can't remember them off the top of my head.
Well, mine is my very early morning jam sandwich usually nourishes people. You don't need the people, so actually we can still use that one.
That's very Paddington with a jam sandwich. Jam sandwiches aren't a thing, at least from my perspective. They don't come up around here, right?
Yeah, that's true. What other? There's something about my very easy method just speeds up naming planets, and you really do need Pluto for that one.
The one I had was my very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. That's what it was. 9 pizzas. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas.
Wow, that's opulent humble brag going on there. You need 9 pizzas. Depends on the size of your family, I suppose.
Mm. But Pluto, of course, corresponds to Hades, though there has been some conflation and confusion between Pluton, the name of the Hades like god, and Plutos, who is a god of wealth.
Easy mistake to make.
Right.
That N makes all the difference.
Mhm.
Oh, and we haven't said the sun.
Oh, we haven't talked about the sun at all.
I mean, the biggest thing in our sky.
The reason we're alive.
Lovely life-giving sun. The word sun is about as old as words get
Mhm.
in the English language. It's always been with us as far back as you go, and it's always meant that burning ball in the sky.
Mhm. The word, like, soul, which is affiliated with the sun, appears in words like parasol,
Hmm.
which is, like, something that protects you from the sun, and
Yeah.
which is also, like, oddly parallel to the word umbrella, which means, like, something that shades you from the sun.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
you have parasol
Mhm.
and parapluie, which are either protecting you from the sun or protecting you from the rain. A parapluie is the French for an umbrella, but you can also have a parasol in French as well.
Do you know why helium is named after Helios, which is the Greek name for the sun?
Oh, let me try and have a guess about this one. I feel like I should know this.
It's probably not as exciting as I'm framing it to be, but basically the element was detected in the solar spectrum during an eclipse in 1868, which was cool.
Right. Is the big burning ball a good place to end?
I think that's probably a good end all be all. We've stayed mostly in the solar system. We've touched
Yeah.
on the universe in other episodes, but perhaps one day we'll venture beyond our solar system and our galaxy toward some of the other terms for space. But for now, I think
Yeah.
that's a nice closing point.
If the sun does not consume us all in the meantime,
Let's
indeed.
hope not.
Great. Well, so uh, this is the end of episode number 10 of the first series, I'm going to call it, or first season, as you might call it, of Words Unravelled. We're going to take a break of just a few weeks now to catch up on some other projects. What are you working on, Jess?
Well, I just turned in a manuscript, so I'll need to edit
Oh,
that and do some work on that. I may have a card game coming up soon, which I'm looking forward to.
no way.
Yeah, so I'm going to dig in with that a little bit. And in addition to the day job and everything else, of course.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We have day jobs, right? That's the problem. That's why we need just a little break just to catch up on other work. I also have something papery in the works as well. I'll
Ooh.
reveal more about that in the future. It's all very sort of early days, but when it's ready, people will sure know about it. So if you want to make sure you don't miss our return in a few weeks' time, be sure to ensure that you are subscribed to this channel. And if you're on YouTube, if that's your platform of preference, then make sure you click the little bell thing and then you'll be told as soon as we come back.
We look forward to returning in just a few weeks.
And also, oh, can I just do a quick thank you, Jess?
Oh, yeah.
We should thank our pal Martin,
Hmm.
who not only provided the marvelous music for this series, he did it all. It's just him. It's just him. Every instrument, it's all him. But he's also been a great support in trying to make the podcast sound better than we technologically illiterate pair could do on our own. So huge thanks to Martin Williams for his help with this first season of the podcast.
Here's to Martin.
And I'm sure he'll help us with the next one too.
Hmm. With that, we'll see you in just a few turns of the third rock from the sun. In the meantime, send us a note at wordsunravelledpod@gmail.com. That's with 2 L's.